A failed hero turns into a monster after getting attacked by a parasite but pretends to be normal. Kafka lives in a world where monsters named Kaijus are a constant threat to humanity, but mankind has learned to live with this issue and have created a special force to deal with these monsters. One day another kaiju appears out of nowhere from the sea and attacks the port, threatening the city with floods, while an emergency announcement is released for people to get in the underground shelters for their safety. The monster turns out to be a 60-meter-tall behemoth who causes destruction in the entire city as he walks through the building, while the people of the area could do nothing but watch helplessly. The government immediately sends in the defense force, who surround the kaiju from all sides and shoot missiles at it after making sure the area has been evacuated. This entire sequence is televised all over the country, where people watch it online and wonder which division will fight the monster this time. It's the special forces from the 3rd Division that get mobilized this time, and a couple of soldiers emerge from the chopper with special weapons and dive down on the nearby buildings. The kaiju continues to destroy anything that comes in his way, but now the 3rd Division lays down suppressing fire, distracting the monster and injuring it, while some of them run directly at the beast, shooting at it while dodging its deadly attacks with ease. Taking advantage of this distraction, their team leader, who was ready with a hand cannon, shoots a blast at the kaiju, hitting it directly in the heart, taking its life in an instant. The kaiju bubbles up and explodes into a bloody mess, while the team leader watches as blood falls all around her. Later that day, Kafka looks at the mess through binoculars while eating his lunch, thinking about how much work they will have to do to clean everything up. Meanwhile, the citizens are cheering for the 3rd Division as they eliminated the kaiju with 0 casualties and in a very small amount of time. Kafka arrived at the location, looking at the giant crowd as they cheer for the defense group while no one pays any attention to him as he walks past them towards the dead monster. This is because he is a cleaner whose job begins after the battles are over and they do all the dirty work, while the people who create all this mess are celebrated as heroes. He climbs on top of the carcass and starts dissecting the beast into smaller pieces to clean everything up, while a drone comes over to collect some of the samples. He asks his fellow mates to get him a heated chainsaw, when he notices that one of the newbies was trying to hoist up the intestine of the monster, which is very dangerous. He shouts at the man to back off immediately, but it was too late as the intestine ends up bursting, and the man ends up getting hurt in the process. Kafka immediately comes down and runs towards him and applies first aid as he has seen these injuries before and knows how to deal with them. He then looks at the remaining carcass and wonders about how the hell are they going to clean everything within a week. But before he could do anything, his supervisor tells him that he is needed to attend a different part of the kaiju, which turns out to be the intestines, which is the most dangerous and dirty part of the job. Regardless of how much he hates this work, Kafka gives his all and dives headfirst into the intestines to clean it up. Later that night, he returns back to his room, which is pretty dirty for a guy whose entire job is cleaning things up. He tries to get the smell of the intestines out of his nose, but after failing to do so, he notices the program on the TV showing the leader of the 3rd Division known as Mina, who is so incredibly talented that just at the age of 27, not only did she become the captain of her division, but has also slayed close to 100 Kaijus. This makes Kafka remember his past, as it turns out that Mina and him were childhood friends who once made a promise to each other that they will eliminate the Kaijus from the earth as they overlook the death and destruction caused by them. He snaps back to reality as the reporter claims that her popularity has made her a very strong candidate to become a future commander of the defense forces. He shuts the television as it was getting too depressing, but he reminds himself that cleaning is also a very important job, and because of his job, he is able to live in a decent apartment and eat whatever he wants to eat. The next morning, he heads back to work when his colleagues call him over to introduce a new part-time student that is going to intern with them. He tells Kafka that this kid is named Ikai and has the dream of becoming the member of the defense force, which is coincidentally the same dream that Kafka had when he was younger, but he eventually gave up on his dream and is now a veteran in the cleaning industry. Kafka turns around embarrassed and starts shuffling through his locker when Ikai asks why did he abandon his dream. Kafka replies that he tried his best, but there is always someone that will be better and one step ahead, and also claims that Ikai will understand that as he grows older. To his surprise, Ikai straight up tells him that he will never give up on his dream and moves away to get changed, while Kafka thinks about how he would have looked bad no matter how he replied to that question. Later that day, they get back to the site and the supervisor starts assigning them their duties for the day and puts Ikai in the group to clean the intestines, which makes Kafka happy for a moment, as this will teach Ikai how difficult their job is. But the supervisor tells Kafka that he will also be working on the intestines as he is the best at that job. Kafka cries at his bad fortune but immediately gets to work, while the supervisor tells Ikai that Kafka complains a lot, but he is an excellent worker, and that he would have made an excellent officer if he was able to clear the exam. Later that day, they all have their lunch break, where Ikai has totally lost his appetite, which makes Kafka happy. But he had it just as bad and tries not to puke. He notices that Ikai is not eating anything, so he throws a vitamin drink at his face and tells him to drink it, while also offering him a pair of nose plugs to keep out the stench. Ikai refuses to follow his advice, but Kafka ends up forcing him to do as he says. Later that day, everyone finishes up their work and leaves while Kafka does one final check, noticing that the worst parts have been cleaned. Ikai arrives behind him and thanks him for helping him throughout the day, as without him, the day would have been much harder. Moreover, he tells Kafka that the age limit for the Defense Force exams have been relaxed to 33 years, and even though it is none of his business, he thinks that Kafka should try reappearing in the exam. After that, Ikai begins leaving, but Kafka stops him to say that he is a good kid, embarrassing Ikai. But suddenly a kaiju appears right behind him from the ground, and would have killed Ikai, if not for Kafka, who risked his life to push him out of the way. They both fall over to the ground, injured, when Ikai tries to get up but is swatted aside by the monster. Kafka shouts at him to run away as fast as possible and call the defense force, but Ikai refuses to leave him alone. Kafka tells him that he can never be in the force if he dies here, which convinces Ikai to call for help, while Kafka grabs a rod and with a smile on his face distracts the monster while running away. He runs through the deserted streets littered with broken buildings from the last attack, while the kaiju follows at full speed and would have killed him, but Kafka enters a narrow doorway where the kaiju is unable to follow. Kafka runs straight ahead without looking back and jumps out of the window, getting slashed on his face, when he suddenly remembers how Mina was sad because a cat she knew died in the attack. But Kafka tries to cheer her up, and later, they both make a promise with each other to join the defense forces together and eliminate all the kaijus from the face of the earth. He snaps back to reality and wonders where it all went wrong, while the monster starts gaining up on him. Kafka decides to take a stand and makes a plan to attack the legs, but the kaiju is way too fast and strikes at him before he could react, throwing up in the air as his entire life flashes in front of him. He falls to the ground, while the kaiju smashes his leg with its hand, leaving Kafka no choice but to accept his fate and die. Just as the kaiju was about to delete Kafka from this planet, Ikai arrives out of nowhere with an iron rod and hits it in the face, saving Kafka's life. Kafka shouts at him to run away, but Ikai claims that he has notified the defense group already, and claims that he could never become an officer if he can't even save someone's life. The kaiju starts attacking the young man while Kafka wonders why the hell is he so weak and useless. He realizes that nothing has changed in his life, and even now he cannot save a single person, even though he dreamed of being an officer. Just as the kaiju was about to end both Kafka and Ikai's life, a white tiger appears out of nowhere and starts attacking the monster, causing it to explode and die on the spot. Suddenly, Kafka hears Mina's voice as she assigns her teammates different roles, telling them to secure the perimeter and take care of the injured people, while she searches the area for any other monsters. Kafka ends up losing consciousness and wakes up in the hospital at night, where he thinks about how Mina has achieved her goal and reached at a position where Kafka can never even think to follow her. He was feeling miserable when Ikai calls his name and he realizes that he is not alone. Ikai thanks him for saving his life and telling him to run away, before claiming that he thinks Kafka should really try to be a defense force officer, as he would be really good at that job. Kafka thinks about it, and with a new sense of inspiration, he decides to appear in the next exam for the defense force when he suddenly notices something weird flying around. Before he could scream about the kaiju in his compartment, the monster rushes in and lodges himself deep into his throat, muffling his screams, as Ikai realizes that something is wrong and rushes to check up on him. To his absolute horror, Kafka looks at himself in the window, only to realize that he has been turned into a kaiju himself. He screams at Ikai that he is Kafka, while Ikai is too stunned to say a word, but an old man from the hospital spots them, and immediately starts calling the defense forces while Kafka worries about how to save his life. The defense forces are immediately alerted and Mina assembles a team of kaiju hunters, while an alert is sounded for everyone to stay indoors and lock their doors, as a small kaiju has been sighted. Back at the hospital, Ikai can't believe what he is witnessing and wonders whether Kafka got devoured by a kaiju, but it becomes immediately apparent that the kaiju is none other than Kafka. The old man who saw everything starts freaking out while Ikai tells Kafka that they need to make the old guy understand that they will not harm him. To do this, Kafka decides to try and smile, but the old man gets a heart attack just looking at his hideous face and lies down on the ground, shaking with fear. Kafka quickly goes over to check whether the old hag is okay, but to his surprise he is so strong that he breaks the wall of the room just by touching it. He gets scared himself and realizes that he is totally becoming a kaiju. This arouses the other patients who come over to check, only to be scared by Kafka in his hideous monster form. Ikai tells Kafka that they don't have a lot of time as the defense forces must be on their way to the hospital, so they both decide to flee the scene. Kafka immediately heads out to the window and tries to open it. Unfortunately, because of his strength, he completely destroys the window in the process. He gets really impressed by his own strength, but Ikai tells him this is not the time for that, and he jumps out the window. Kafka tries to jump out as well, but his jump is so strong that he falls somewhere far away. Ikai starts running down the street to try and find Kafka, when he suddenly spots him following him down the street. To his horror, Kafka doesn't even look like the normal kaiju now and has gotten even uglier with weird tentacles coming out of his body. Ikai asks whether he knows how to control them, but he claims that he can't control anything. Just then his tongue shoots out of his mouth and catches a bird before eating it alive, which really impresses Kafka as he always wanted to be Venom. But Ikai finds it disgusting and tells him to get a hold of himself. Somehow, he manages to revert back to the normal kaiju form, and they start running to find a place to hide when Kafka tells Ikai that he really wants to pee. Ikai tells him to hold it in as they don't have the time, but Kafka is unable to hold it and ends up peeing out of his chest. This really embarrasses Kafka, who realizes that he is never going to get married and will die a virgin if anyone gets to know about it. Ikai tells him that they have other stuff to worry about and tries to drag him. Kafka stays on the ground and asks Ikai whether he thinks he can join the defense force even now. Ikai immediately shakes his head, claiming it's impossible as they will kill him on sight. Kafka starts going through a midlife crisis, realizing that his dream will always stay a dream and that he can never catch up to Mina. Ikai ends up finding an abandoned construction site and tells Kafka that they should be safe here if they hide. But just then Kafka gets a weird feeling about something coming from below the ground, and suddenly there is a huge explosion on the other side of the city. Ikai tells him that this is lucky for them as now the defense forces will have to deal with the other explosion first, giving them extra time to hide and figure this out. It turns out that another kaiju has emerged from the ground, completely destroying a house, trapping a woman while her daughter cries as she tries to free her from the fallen debris. The mother tells her to run away, but the child is adamant and tries to move the items trapping her mother but fails to do anything. Just then, the kaiju appears behind them and breaks through the remaining wall to claim its food, but just as it opens its mouth to devour the poor girl, Kafka appears out of nowhere and punches him straight in the face, blasting it away. He surprises even himself with his power, but immediately turns his attention towards the little girl, asking whether she is okay. The girl starts crying out of fear, so he tries to lighten up the mood by making funny faces, but it all goes to waste, as his ugly face can make even Donald Trump cry. Thankfully, Ikai comes to save the day, and comforts the girl while Kafka removes the fallen debris from her mother. Ikai quickly checks on the mother, and thankfully realizes that she is still alive and is just unconscious right now. Before they can feel completely safe though, the kaiju arrives once again, looking uglier than ever to claim its prey. Kafka tells Ikai to take the mother and the child to safety while he deals with the monster. Ikai asks what is he planning to do, and Kafka replies that he is going to punch the monster as hard as possible, hoping for the best. Ikai immediately runs away with the victims, while Kafka charges his punch that start glowing with electricity and delivers an uppercut so strong that it rocks the monster completely, blasting it in the air as it completely explodes into nothingness. Kafka is beyond shocked as a bloody rain starts as the remains of the monster falls to the ground. While hiding behind cover, Ikai asks whether Kafka is still in control of his body, and he claims that it's alright and everything is fine. He walks up to the little girl, who hides behind Ikai, and tells her that she doesn't have to worry anymore as she is safe, and soon the defense forces will arrive to help her. Ikai tells Kafka that he has called an ambulance and urges him that they should leave before anyone arrives. Kafka, however, was still stuck on the dream about becoming a defense force member and standing alongside Nina as an equal. He turns towards Ikai and removes his face mask before telling him that his dream about becoming a defense force member is still alive and he will give the exam. Later that night, Mina arrives with her team, only to find the kaiju already eliminated. She is unable to understand who can destroy a big monster like that, but turns around to comfort the little girl, telling her not to worry as she will destroy every single kaiju. The little girl nods, but tells her to spare the good kaiju who saved her and her mother from the monster. This really surprises her, but she doesn't say anything about it. Meanwhile, Kafka returns back to normal, and alongside Ikai they return back to the hospital, lying to the other patients that they ended up hiding after the kaiju appeared in the room, but are completely safe. 3 months pass by after that without much incident, during which Kafka learns how to better control his powers, but the media is still looking for Kafka's kaiju form, which they have named Kaiju 8, who is the only kaiju who was able to escape from the defense force. Ikai watches this news from the cleaning office, when another senior hands him some mail which turns out to be the results for the defense force exams. He checks his results, only to see that he has passed the first round and needs to appear for the second one. The senior hands him another envelope containing Kafka's results and asks him to take it to him, as Kafka is on the site, cleaning a body up. Ikai takes the results and starts walking, but checks it on the way, only to see that Kafka has passed as well. He takes the results to the site, where Kafka is having lunch atop the body in his kaiju form. Ikai immediately dropkicks him, claiming that the defense force will exterminate him on sight if they saw him, and Kafka apologizes, claiming that he still ends up slipping up once in a while. After rubbing his face, he asks Ikai whether he is fine now, but he still has his fangs, and Ikai shouts at him to quickly take care of it and shouts at him for being so careless as he is all over the news. Kafka finally reverts back to normal, and Ikai hands him his results, which he looks at and is glad, but Ikai asks why isn't he happier. Kafka then explains that he always passes the first round but fails in the second. He then tries to open a bottle, but ends up crushing it completely as he transforms into the monster, which makes Ikai tell him that he shouldn't give the exam, but Kafka begs him to not abandon him, and Ikai agrees before leaving. 10 days later they head to the exam stadium, which is huge and crawling with security. They look around at all the different examinees when a blonde girl heads over to them and asks Kafka to move his van somewhere else as she wants to park there. When Kafka refuses, she takes her overcoat out and uses her special power to literally grab and throw the van aside like a toy. This really shocks Ikai, who asks about her identity, and she claims that she is examinee number 2016, and her favorite pastime is to kill a kaiju. She then moves towards Kafka menacingly and sniffs him before asking why the hell does he smell like a kaiju. This really scares him as he wonders how to escape this predicament without blowing his cover and getting killed. The girl introduces herself as Kiko, who seems to be pretty rich, and talks down to Ikai about how they should have simply given her the parking space. Just then, to their surprise, Kafka walks up to the flipped van and puts it back up by picking it like a toy. This really shocks Kiko, who wonders whether this guy also has a special suit like her. He tells her not to scratch the van as it is company property, but before he could take the space back, her butler rolls up in the G-Wagon, taking the parking space all for himself. Kafka gets mad at this, but he has no other options left, while Kiko starts walking away with her butler and her guards, showing how much of a baller she is. Kafka was ranting about her when he noticed that Ikai looks super mad. He knows that Kafka used his kaiju powers and reminds him that if anyone saw it, Kafka would be killed and Ikai would be imprisoned as well for not disclosing this information. Kafka tries to defend himself and claims that he was being smart about it and only transformed his hands to pick the van up. But Ikai is not in the mood of hearing anything and tells Kafka that if he uses his powers for no reason once again, he will send him back home. Meanwhile, inside the headquarters, the members of the defense force take a look at all the new talent that they have got. They realize that this batch looks very promising as students from the best universities are taking part to become field agents this time. They notice that some of the talent surpasses the others, like the green-haired boy with the calm attitude named Izu, the short yellow-haired guy called Aoi, and the red-haired knucklehead called Furu. But even after all of them, The most promising of these students are Kiko, who is only 16 years old, but graduated from California's best university after skipping a lot of grades because of her innate talent. Everyone's eyes seem to be at her as she walks up to Kafka and asks whether he even knows who she is or how strong she is. Kafka is a dumbass who doesn't know anything but ends up challenging her, claiming that he will get a better score in the tests. Both Ikai and Kafka discuss a game plan for the exam as none of them are particularly good at the written tests, so they need to score as many marks as possible in the physical exam. The exam starts and Kafka, who thought it would be a cakewalk for him considering he does hard physical labor every single day, finally realizes why people hate working out as he is forced to do soldier crawls, pull-ups, running circuits and etc., which totally drains him out and he falls to the ground exhausted by the end of it. The results arrive and he only gets a measly 219 rank out of 225 examinees, making him bottom of the barrel. Meanwhile, Kiko walks up to him and shows him that she got rank 5 and asks whether he still wants to keep his bet. He tells her that he will never back down against a spoiled brat, which pisses her bodyguards out and they beat it out of him immediately. Later, they all head towards the next phase of the exam, which Kafka is very excited about because Ikai told him that phase 2 of the exam has been cleaning and disposing of kaiju bodies for the last 2 years continuously. This makes him really happy because he is one of the best at this job, and can score really highly in this exam, giving him a fighting chance against these talented people. Soon, the vice captain of the 3rd Division arrives in front of them styling a bowl-cut hairstyle and introduces himself as Hoshina. He tells them that the next part of the exam is going to be very fun, and opens a gate behind him. Kafka watches with eager eyes as he waits for the announcement to wear kaiju disposal suits and clean some bodies. But to his absolute horror, the next test turns out to be kaiju elimination. He looks at Ikai annoyed, but Ikai claims that they must have changed it this year recently, and he can do nothing about it. Hoshina explains how the test is going to operate, while one of the Kaijus runs up at him from behind, scaring Kafka who falls to the ground, but before it could reach Hoshina, the barriers come down and blocks him, while the guards aim their guns at the monster, ready to shoot. Kiko starts laughing at Kafka for being such a coward and moves inside. They are taken inside a room where they are given a special suit that all kaiju hunters wear. They all start putting the suits on, while Hoshina explains that this suit is their best weapon against the monsters, as it is made by the materials obtained from a dead kaiju. It also has a special property of boosting the strength of the person wearing it, which is very important in a combat situation. Ikai puts his suit on, and to his surprise, the suit immediately gets fitted to each and every muscle of his body as if it was the venom. He realizes that he is not only wearing the suit, but the suit has basically become integrated with his body. Hoshina announces that the suit can take out the latent power of a person known as the combat power, which shows them how much strength they have and how synchronized they are with the suits. He announces some of the best numbers of this batch, and Ikai is the first one with 8% combat power, Izu with 18%, Aoi with 15%, and Furu with 14% combat power. Hoshina tells them not to worry as even after rigorous training, it is only around 20%, and usually they are lucky only to get one student that has over 10% combat power. Suddenly the girl wearing the glasses gets shocked and tells Hoshina that Kiko has 46% combat power. This really surprises Hoshina as he realizes she is already on the level of a platoon leader right now, and has set a record for having the highest combat power that they have ever seen in a newbie. Ikai seems to be bothered by his low power, but Hoshina tells him not to worry as even 8% is impressive, and they only need to worry if they get 0%, which he has personally never seen before. Suddenly, the Four Eyes claim that Kafka has 0% combat power. This totally cracks Hoshina up as he watches Kafka trying his hardest to draw out any combat powers. He starts rolling on the floor laughing, asking Kafka whether he has constipation, while a red-faced Kafka starts sweating at the thought that he is probably going to fail the moment the test starts. Kiko seems to be annoyed as she wants to see the power Kafka showed her in the parking lot, but there is no time for it as the final test starts. They all stand atop a ridge while Hoshina tells them that these Kaijus have killed over 16 people last year, but were captured alive as they wanted to train the newbies with it. He tells them to fight them with all they have got while the drone camera will follow them, and if anyone gets seriously injured or looks like they can't continue, the lab will deploy their shield, and they will immediately fail the test. The test starts and all the participants jump into the area, while Kiko shows them how it's done as she jumps up to a building and starts running on it to overtake everyone. She runs around the area and spots a kaiju sitting out in the open, which she blasts to shreds without even stopping and moves on to the next area. She jumps on a building and kills another kaiju that 2 trainees were fighting and keeps running, while Kafka tells Ikai to keep up as they will fall behind. Ikai looks back and tells Kafka that he is the one lagging, but Kafka tells him that without the power of the suit, the guns are really heavy and hard to operate. Ikai asks what should they do as they clearly don't have much firepower to match the stronger participants. Just then, Hoshina announces that the captain of the 3rd Division, Mina, will also be watching the exam. This reminds him of the promise he made to her all those years ago, and he decides to keep trying no matter what. He tells Ikai that they are being followed by drones individually, which means that apart from killing kaiju, the force is also looking for adaptability and teamwork, which they can show by being good supports. He throws away his rifle and takes out his handgun and starts running towards the action. He finds Izu's group struggling to kill a kaiju when suddenly Kafka notices the hooves on its fingers. This reminds him that he has cleaned and disposed of this kaiju before and knows its weaknesses. He immediately takes out his flashbang and decides to play some CSGO as he throws the grenade without warning his teammates. The flashbang explodes, and it immediately causes a lot of pain to the monster and stuns it. Kafka explains that this kaiju can't see well, but has excellent hearing. He then turns towards Izu's group, who is also confused, and tells them to target its belly as it is the weak spot of this monster. Izu seems a bit skeptical, but follows the advice and shoots it down in the belly, killing it immediately. He thanks Kafka for his help, who starts running towards the other end to find some more action, when suddenly another kaiju emerges and hits him square in the body, injuring him as he falls down to the ground. Ikai has no idea what to do, while the 4 eyes in the lab tells Hoshina that Kafka's internal organs have been damaged and he has multiple fractures. Hoshina tells him to ready the shield, but Kafka is not ready to give up as he tries his best to get up and face the beast. The kaiju runs up to him and gets ready to finish him off, when suddenly it gets shot at and is destroyed immediately. The shooter turns out to be Kiko, who tells him that she wants to see his true strength and walks away. Ikai immediately goes near Kafka, who realizes that his leg is completely fractured. Hoshina tells him that his vitals are damaged and that he should drop out of the test for his own safety. But Kafka is not done yet and manages to somehow stand up as he thinks about how everyone else always surpasses him. He screams that he is not going to lose this time, and to everyone's surprise, his combat power goes up by 0.01%, which makes them realize that maybe this guy can still pull it off. Everyone is surprised that Kafka stood up despite a broken foot, and Hoshina warns him that he is allowed to continue, but if it looks like his life is in danger, he will forcibly make him drop out the next time. Kafka tells Ikai to ignore him and head on ahead, but he says he will support him because they make a good team. Kafka takes his hand and climbs on his shoulders so that they can move forward. Everyone stares at the weird duo and Hoshina can't stop laughing. He even suggests that they should pass these guys already because they need comic reliefs like them in the defense force. Kafka tells Ikai to not worry about anything else and follow Kiko as fast as he can. He runs like the wind, while the other people are also hunting down the Kaijus in teams. Kiko speeds through the entire test site as if she is playing. She blasts through the Kaijus faster than others and doesn't even let anyone help her. She shows her gunslinging skills first, and then picks up a steel pole to pummel the Kaijus with it. She soon hunts down all the smaller Kaijus and heads to the boss, and immediately throws a grenade at it. The kaiju takes some damage and loses its balance because of the explosion, and Kiko does some parkour to reach a high spot and jumps towards it. She does a split over the kaiju's open jaw and shoots its insides. The monster's body bubbles up and explodes, and Kiko gets back to the ground before the kaiju's demolished body falls down. The proctors are impressed, and 4 Eyes tells everyone that the test is complete and they can begin heading back now. Kafka is shocked to hear this and complains that Kiko is unfairly fast. Both he and Ikai fall to the ground and catch their breath. Meanwhile, Hoshina and Mina are impressed by Kiko's abilities because no one retired and the casualties were kept to a minimum thanks to her. Hoshina says that this was to be expected of their director's only daughter, and she will surely become a ray of hope for the country in the future. Meanwhile, Kiko is satisfied with her flawless performance, and after catching her breath, she decides to return to rub her achievements on Kafka's face. However, just as she turns around, A mysterious figure appears behind the smokescreen. It turns out to be a human-sized kaiju, and before Kiko can react to it, it shoots her through the heart. On the other hand, Kafka and Ikai think they only have to wait for results now, when suddenly, they hear other participants screaming. They turn around and see the Kaijus they just killed rising up and mutating into something much more powerful. Everyone panics and Ikai suggests Kafka to get out of the place, but he suddenly hears the voice of Kiko groaning from pain and bleeding out. She somehow managed to save her life by focusing the entire shield over her heart. But her troubles are far from over, as the large kaiju she just defeated has also come back to life thanks to the mysterious mushroom kaiju. She wonders what kind of kaiju it is, when it suddenly asks her if she can still move. Kiko freezes on hearing the kaiju talk, because there has been no record of them talking yet. Not only can the mushroom kaiju talk, he is also intelligent and sympathetic enough to let the healing kaiju deal with Kiko to get his revenge. Kiko gets up and takes aim, but the mushroom bastard shoots her arms and legs, causing her to fall to her knees. She screams in pain, and the voice signal reaches the monitoring station. Four Eyes tries getting a visual on her, but the drones are not working well now. Still, she can sense abnormalities in Kiko's body because of the sensors in the suit. Hoshina asks what is going on, and she shows him the visuals of the minor kaijus coming back to life. Everyone is confused by what is happening because this has never been recorded before. Four Eyes gets a reading of the revived large kaiju, and says that it has a fortitude rating of 6-4, which means it has gotten stronger after the revival. Mina immediately orders her crew to deploy the shields on all the participants, and tells Four Eyes to send drones to Kiko to get her the live footage. She tells Hoshina to follow her, because they are the only people here who can deal with the revived kaiju. The participants are told to evacuate immediately, and they run to the shelter, but Kiko is still struggling to get up. She doesn't plan on evacuating either. She knows that if she doesn't stop the huge kaiju, a lot of people will die. She uses the special features of the suit to repair her injuries temporarily, and gets back on her feet. She thinks that since she can still move, she can still fight. She yells that she needs to be perfect and takes aim, but the kaiju just slaps her away. Kiko suffers some serious injuries, and then suddenly she sees a flashback of her childhood. She had scored the perfect score in her school examination, and her friend was happy for her. Kiko herself was proud of her achievement, but then her friend's father came to pick her up. On seeing the bond between the father and daughter, she felt envious. She heard the parents of all the students who had come to receive them and cheer them on, and felt lonely. Only her butler came to greet her, and told her that her dad would be pleased with her results. Kiko put on a cheerful face in response to the butler's words, but at night, her dad said that no one cares that she got a perfect score because taking time to celebrate small victories makes one complacent. He told her to immediately start working towards her next goal if she achieves something, because she needs to be perfect for the sake of her family and her country. Those words of her stern and emotionally distant father motivate Kiko to keep moving and fighting despite her injuries, but she gets bitch-slapped by the kaiju yet again. She tries to get up once again, but this time, she cannot manage to do that. Kiko drops her gun, because her arm has been broken and twisted into Tetris shapes. She screams in pain, while the kaiju regrows its destroyed horns and begins charging energy in them. Four Eyes in the control sees this through the drones, and she immediately informs Mina and Hoshina that the kaiju has regrown its offensive body parts that they cut out. Hoshina panics and hopes that they make it in time. Meanwhile, the kaiju gathers its energy between its horns to attack Kiko, who has accepted her fate. She apologizes to her dad for not being perfect till the end and starts crying. In the meantime, the kaiju has fully charged his energy ball, and he shoots it towards Kiko. However, before it can hit her, Kafka comes before Kiko and tells her that she did a great job. She is flabbergasted on seeing him there, and the very next moment, the energy ball hits them. It causes huge destruction in the area surrounding them, but Kiko is completely safe, because Kafka blocked the impact by turning his arms into kaiju form. He transforms his whole body into kaiju form and tells Kiko to leave the rest to him. On the other hand, the rest of the participants are evacuating the test zone, and Ikai is worried about Kafka, who disappeared when the Kaijus began to revive. Ikai knows that Kafka will transform into a kaiju to save Kiko, even if it means that he will risk getting killed by the defense forces. Back at Kafka's location, Kiko can't comprehend what she is seeing, and then Kafka leaps towards her. She freaks out, but he just wants to beg her to not rat him out to anyone. In the background, the giant kaiju has begun charging another energy ball, and it shoots it towards Kafka, who simply flicks it away to the border of the test zone. Kafka tells Kiko that he will explain the details to her later, and she should just relax right now because it won't take him more than a couple seconds to deal with the kaiju. He begins channeling his strength, and the readings are recorded by the drones. Four Eyes can't believe that a new kaiju has appeared on the scene, and on top of that, its fortitude ranking is an unbelievable 9-8. She can't confirm it with visuals, but reports it to Hoshina, who thinks that the sensors malfunctioned because of the explosion. Because if there is a kaiju with a fortitude rating of 9-8, then it is the strongest kaiju humanity has ever seen. Back at the battle site, Kafka is ready to destroy the giant kaiju in one hit. His body modifies to give him extra traction and jet boost behind his arms to maximize the impact of his punch. The giant kaiju runs towards him and tries punching him, but Kafka meets its punch with his own. Kafka's punch overwhelms the kaiju, sending its arm muscles flying first, and then the muscles from its entire body. The kaiju is blown to smithereens, and when the dust clears, only its two hind legs are on the ground, while everything else falls from the sky as the rain of blood and body tissues. Kiko watches this, flabbergasted at the destruction in front of her. Kafka confidently tells the kaiju to return to life from that, and the organs immediately begin to show movement again. He panics and takes it back, begging the kaiju to not come back to life, and it surprisingly falls dead for good. Kafka then suddenly turns around and rushes to Kiko, saving her from a kaiju that was going to attack her from behind. He reveals his face from within his transformation and smiles at Kiko, saying that he is glad that she is fine. He tells her to not put herself in reckless situations like that again, and suddenly, Ikai arrives there and hits him with a karate chop to the head, saying that he should try to ingrain that advice in his life as well. As Ikai lectures Kafka about being reckless and transforming into a kaiju when officers of the defense force are present nearby, Kiko collapses. They evacuate the site, and soon, Mina and Hoshina arrive at the scene of carnage. It reminds them of the demolished kaiju that they saw 3 months ago. There are a lot of strange things that happen this time, and Mina tells everyone to focus on cleanup while she goes to clean up the remaining mutated Kaijus. Meanwhile, Kafka is back in the hospital with some fractures, and Ikai is looking after him. Mina pays them a visit and thanks them for bringing Kiko back to the rescue center safely. She salutes them and leaves, and Kafka can't bring himself to call her, because he wants to wait till he becomes an officer. On the other hand, Kiko is receiving treatment using the most advanced medical equipment, and when she wakes up, she finds Hoshina there for her. He thanks her for defeating the revived huge kaiju that kept casualties to a minimum. Kiko hesitates on hearing that, but she remembers that she must keep Kafka's secret, so she declares that she was the one who killed the huge kaiju. On the other hand, the mushroom bastard is in a public toilet, listening to news about how there were no fatalities in the exam despite Kaijus reviving. He can't believe that, and wonders if the captains are so strong that they can save everyone so quickly. Suddenly, he gets a call, telling him that break time is over, and the kaiju transforms into a man, complaining that humans are so fussy about time. He wears his clothes and goes out, telling his co-workers that he just had a bad stomach. Coincidentally, he works in the same monster cleaning company as Kafka and Ikai, and no one suspects anything about him being a kaiju, despite him being lousy at controlling his body. A few days have passed, and the results for the Defense Force exams are going to be declared soon. Kafka is panicking amidst fears of flunking this time too, and as Ikai tells him to calm down, they suddenly receive their results via mail. Both of them are overcome with nerves. Kafka nervously pulls out the letter and his eyes widen in surprise when he reads its contents. The next day, all the past students are gathered in the headquarters of the Defense Force. Izu and Aoi have passed along with all the other favorites, but Kafka is missing. Kiko enters the room late, and a girl rushes to congratulate her because she topped the exam results. The redhead Furu collides with Ikai, and immediately recognizes him as the guy with the uncle-like guy. They introduce themselves to each other, and quickly become friends. Furu asks him what happened to Kafka, and Ikai is nervous about what to tell him. Soon, Captain Mina enters the room, and the induction ceremony begins. Kiko is called to the stage as the representative of the incoming class, and Mina gives her the oath while declaring that all the 27 people selected in the test are now officers working for the Defense Force. Kiko takes the papers and salutes Mina, swearing that they will lay down their lives to protect their country. Mina thanks her for handling the situation so well during the test, and Kiko is taken aback on hearing this, as she feels guilty for taking credit for Kafka's actions. She looks at the people gathered below, and wonders why is Kafka not among them. Suddenly, Kafka nervously walks into the room, apologizing to everyone for coming late, much to everyone's amusement. It turns out that initially, Kafka had failed the test. When Mina and the rest of the officers were gathered to evaluate the candidates, everyone agreed that Kafka lacked the physical abilities to be an officer, and he could not even draw the power from his suit. Mina was about to pass her verdict, when suddenly Hoshina declared that he would take Kafka. He said that even though Kafka is weak by himself in the test, he was a great support for everyone else. He could pinpoint the weakness of the Kaijus and assisted everyone without worrying about his kill count. Though Kafka might never become a full-time officer after getting a promotion, he still deserves a fair chance to be trained as a cadet. As Mina recalls this, she softly smiles at him. She announces that Kafka is being enrolled only as a cadet, so she made him sit out during the officer induction ceremony. All the major players are surprised by this exception, but they knew that Kafka would make it. After that, Mina addresses everyone and thanks them for passing the hard test to become a Defense Force officer. She asks everyone to entrust their lives to her, as she is going to lead them from the front into the battlefield. Kafka suddenly declares that he will also be standing by Mina's side soon, and the entire room is thunderstruck. They wonder what is the deal with this guy, and how did he let his intrusive thoughts win in such a serious situation. Kafka also realizes this a few seconds later, and then it is turn for Mina to discipline him as his senior officer. For speaking out of turn and disrespecting his senior, she punishes him to do 100 push-ups. Kafka freaks out, but Hoshina bursts laughing, saying this was the main reason he selected this guy. He tells Mina that she is going soft on the cadet, but she leaves with a subtle smile on her face. Hoshina then looks at Kafka on the floor, and thinks that there is more than one reason he wanted him. When the Kaijus revived during the test, there was a Kaiju whose fortitude reading was 9-8. Hoshina thinks that it was probably a faulty sensor, but apparently, at the exact time the monstrous Kaiju appeared, Kafka's suit stopped sending any signals. Hoshina suspects that there is something strange with Kafka, and that is why he plans to keep him close so that he can find out what it is. On the floor, Kafka has expended all his energy in doing just 100 push-ups, and he falls down as everyone cheers on him. Kiko comes to him and asks him to follow her to talk in private, but everyone starts asking her if she plans to confess her love to Kafka. She is grossed out just by the idea, and Kafka doesn't even understand what she means. Luckily, Ikai has enough brain cells to compensate for him, and he takes him to talk with Kiko outside the campus. There, Kafka tells her that he ate a kaiju and became one, and she can't believe it. She calls him a glutton, and he replies that he didn't eat it on purpose. Kafka says that maybe if he informs the defense force, they might cure him, but Kiko tells him that will be impossible. Even if he is not killed immediately, he will be subjected to experiments day in and day out, and never be allowed to work as a defense force member. Not only that, Kiko believes that once the kaiju as strong as Kafka is killed, his body parts will be used to make special weapons. He freaks out on hearing all this, and begs her to keep his secret. She kicks him away before agreeing to his request, because she owes him for saving her life. However, she also warns Kafka that if he ever becomes a threat to the humankind, she will immediately kill him. Later, their training begins, and Ikai goes into the training site. He hides behind a pile of rubble and shoots a target that pops up next to him. There are more targets hidden throughout the training site, and he shoots them all down one by one. The supervisor declares that Ikai completed his training in 2.5 minutes and unleashed about 18% of his combat suit's power. Everyone is impressed because Ikai has been growing rapidly ever since the training started, and he has been beating his personal records each time. This ignites Furu's competitive spirit, and when he charges into the training area, he quickly takes down all the targets. He gets a time of 2 minutes and 15 seconds, and a combat power of 20%. Furu is happy to hear that, and smugly tells Ikai that he won again. However, in the time he was bickering with Ikai, Kiko has already cleared the training regime with a 55% combat power rating. She teases the boys, saying that their combined scores are less than her. On the other hand, Izu and Aoi are competing with each other, because they are very close in terms of their physical and overall abilities. While all the big shots are basking in the spirit of competition, Kafka has also completed his training. He took over 6 minutes and 40 seconds for that and unleashed only 1% of his combat power. Despite being completely out of breath, He celebrates that he succeeded in completing the training, and even bothers Kiko, asking if she saw how quickly he is making progress. Hoshina tells him to stop fooling around, because at this rate, he will be fired in 3 months, and Kafka panics. Hoshina then orders everyone to run 10 laps around the training area, and calls it a day with that. Everyone hits the showers after that, and Kafka is dead exhausted because of the extra laps. Ikai and Furu are competing about their physique, and Kafka decides to show them what the body of a real man looks like. Furu is impressed by his bulky muscles, but as soon as Kafka lets go of his breath, his well-toned abs turned into a beer belly. Furu starts laughing at him for having a baby bump, even though he is a man, and Kafka tells him that his comment is offensive for all the trans people out there. They keep bickering till Aoi arrives on the scene and puts them all to shame with his muscles. Everyone jumps into the pool to hide their scrawny bodies, and Kafka thinks that living like this is quite fun. On the other hand, Kiko and other girls are also returning from shower, and they find Mina drinking some milk at the laundry zone. She tells them that there is no need to be formal, so the girls get busy doing their chores. Kiko puts her clothes in the washing machines, but she can't stop staring at Mina's well-toned muscles. Mina notices her, and the flustered Kiko asks her what kind of training she did. She gets up and decides to show Kiko the basics of her training routine. Back in the boys' bath, Furu reveals that he always wanted to join the defense force ever since the day Mina saved him from a kaiju during his middle school era. He claims that she has been his idol ever since, and he wants to become like her. Everyone else says the same, and when Kafka tells them that he is Mina's childhood friend, and they promise to join the defense force together, the boys freak out. He is nervous and wants to go back to his room, but the boys latch on to him and menacingly ask him to share the details. Their training continues after that, comprising both physical exercises and strategy training regarding how to fight Kaijus. They bicker with each other and compete to become better. Kafka puts his all into becoming stronger, but despite that, he is still the weakest in the group. However, everyone supports him to do his best. One night, as everyone is sleeping, Kafka gets out of his room to study because he knows he needs to work harder than others. Hoshina finds him there, and though Kafka is initially shocked, he tells him that he can't afford to get fired. Hoshina knows that Mina is the reason behind Kafka's motivation, and he doesn't hesitate in affirming it. He says that he promised he would fight by Mina's side, and Hoshina asks if he wants to take his position as her vice captain. Kafka says that he will try his best to do that, and though Hoshina is pissed, he gives him the key to the study room so that he can try his best. Kafka thanks him, but Hoshina suddenly advises him to stop being so close to his fellow officers, because anything can happen to anyone here. Suddenly, an emergency alarm sounds and everyone wakes up, realizing it is not a drill. Hoshina tells Kafka that this is what he was talking about, and then asks him to get ready, because it is time for his first mission. It is 3 in the morning, and Mina has called an emergency meeting to discuss the threat at hand. The Four Eyes tells her that the evacuation of the citizens began 15 minutes ago. The epicenter of the kaiju attack is in the Sagamihara area, and the defense force and military are helping the panicky citizens evacuate. The military has also set up a temporary base at a local supermarket, and they are constantly keeping eyes on things. Four Eyes tells Mina that the kaiju has probably entered its breeding phase, which must be the reason it emerged from the ground so abruptly. Not only that, a large number of smaller kaijus have popped up all around it. Mina comes up with a strategy to defeat the big kaiju herself, while leaving the smaller ones to her team. She also sets up a sniper post from which they can easily keep track of the kaiju movements and neutralize them from a distance. She wishes her teammates all the best and salutes them, and they salute her in return. Soon, armored trucks are deployed, with Hoshina personally leading the new recruits into the battle. While everyone is a little nervous, Kafka is worse off than everyone, and he starts vomiting because of his anxiousness, grossing everyone out. Meanwhile, the anti-kaiju artillery battalion has stationed themselves and aimed missiles at the giant kaiju. Hoshina's team is at Point E, which is the designated sniper post. Kafka is feeling better now, but the sight of the gigantic walking mushroom-like kaiju makes him quite worried. The giant kaiju spews out its spores, and then generates tons of smaller mushroom kaijus. Hoshina tells his team that their role is to deal with the tinier monsters, and make sure that they don't go out of the neutralization zone and enter important facilities. Since his team is made up entirely of new recruits, they are positioned at last, and thus they are also the last line of defense. He tells everyone that their scores in the practical training don't matter here, and asks them to show what they are made of. Furu loudly yells to let out his excitement, and that creates a wave of all the boys yelling in unison. Ikai calls Kafka, saying that it is the moment of truth, and he agrees, because this is his chance to prove his abilities in the battlefield and avoid getting fired. He is nervous, but also equally excited, and Ikai tells him that they will make sure that their first mission is a grand success. Soon, the smaller Kaijus enter Zone E, and all the recruits jump from the building to face them. Well, everyone except Kafka, who cautiously climbs down to avoid breaking his bones even before the mission starts. On the other hand, Mina has also reached sniper point, and Four Eyes instructs all the teams to lure the giant kaiju in her line of fire. The artillery unit fires its rockets at the giant kaiju first, and then the aerial forces open fire too. That causes the kaiju to change its direction away from the rockets. Meanwhile, Kafka and others are waiting for the smaller kaijus to show up. Kafka feels confident and thinks that he can manage to unleash significant combat power from his suit. But while he is doing that, a kaiju comes there and sends him flying into a garbage dump. Kiko yells at him to stay behind because he can only command 1% of the suit's power. Suddenly, their seniors begin cursing their luck because they are stuck taking care of the newbies. This pisses Kiko off, and she instantly blows the head of one kaiju with one shot. She begins her onslaught, absolutely demolishing the kaijus, much to the shock of the arrogant senior. Kafka also gives her a thumbs up, and while Kiko tries to act like it doesn't matter to her, her suit clearly detects an abnormal increase in her heartbeat. On another location, Team F manages to bring a kaiju down to its feet, and Furu blasts its head off. He tries showing it off to Ikai, but when he turns around, he is shocked to find that Ikai defeated a kaiju by himself. Ikai reveals that he changed the blast rounds for freezing rounds in his gun, which helped him stop the kaiju from moving, and he believes that this is the unique hunting style he must perfect. In Zone J, Aoi is facing a kaiju by himself. He dodges its attack and then starts shooting it, rapidly destroying its entire body. Izu also tries to shoot down some smaller kaijus, but either they are too fast or he has learned shooting from stormtroopers. He decides to improvise and shoots an electric pole, causing it to fall down and block the path of the kaijus. With that, he easily blasts all the kaijus. The seniors are shocked by the performance the newbies are showing, and even the platoon leader remarks that they exceed even her expectations. However, Izu and Aoi are just competing with each other to see who can hunt more monsters. Other recruits also perform well, and soon, Zone J is cleared of all the small kaijus. Kafka can only be amazed as he hears this report, and then he hears that even Zone F has been cleared thanks to Ikai and Furu. He feels that he is getting left behind and wonders if there is something he can do. He suddenly gets an idea as he recalls the senior talking about how they don't know the weak point of the kaijus yet. Kafka notices the body of a dead kaiju behind him, and determines to contribute to the fight in the way only he can. He begins tearing apart the kaiju's body with ease, thanks to the 1% power of the suit he has managed to draw out. He is amazed by the suit's performance, and wishes that they gave some of these to the guys who do the cleanup. He cuts the interiors of the kaiju and finds that it is a pretty standard fungal-type monster, but the core is not where it usually is. He looks around for the core, and immediately contacts Hoshina about his discovery. Kafka tells Hoshina that the kaiju's core is located at the base of its neck, but it is protected by hard muscles, so hitting it from the sides will be most effective. Hoshina is impressed, but then Kafka reveals a surprising fact to him. He says that even the smaller kaiju have reproductive organs, and if they don't destroy them, they may keep on respawning. Hoshina tells Kafka that he did a damn good job and then asks Four Eyes to relay the information to everyone. Kafka feels proud that he really helped the defense force, and then he immediately heads to neutralize the reproductive parts of the defeated kaijus, determined to do what it takes till he can stand by Mina's side. Suddenly, he hears a huge explosion behind him, and turns around to find that the artillery and helicopters have led the giant kaiju to the designated combat zone. The helicopters withdraw, and then all the teams in the combat zone shoot the legs of the kaiju to immobilize it. It is Mina's chance to shine, and she points a giant-ass sniper cannon at the kaiju. She locks the target and calibrates her gun for all the variables, and then gets ready to fire while thinking about Kafka. She begins loading the gun, and her unleashed combat power reaches a whopping 96% before she presses the trigger. The energy shot flies towards the kaiju and blows a gigantic hole through its body, clearly exposing its core. All the recruits are flabbergasted by this display of power, but none more than Kafka. Mina loads the second round and fires it at the Kaiju's head, completely demolishing it. The Kaiju falls, rattling the earth for a few seconds, but Mina is not yet done with it. She loads a third round and shoots the Kaiju's dead body. Four Eyes exclaims that the Kaiju has stopped moving completely, but Mina loads a fifth round as well. Everyone is shocked and Four Eyes tells her that there is no need for that, but Mina simply asks her to give her the green signal. Once she receives it, she fires again. Kafka is truly amazed, and then Hoshina comes there, asking if he plans to give up on standing by Mina's side now. Kafka asks him if he himself can match Mina's power, and he clearly denies it, stating that he is not good at dealing with the big ones. Just as he is about to talk about the smaller monsters, a Kaiju jumps behind him. Kafka points his gun at it, but Hoshina simply draws out his blade and unsheaths it, and the next moment, the Kaiju is split neatly into 20 pieces. Kafka is astonished, and then Hoshina shows his blade to him, saying that he comes from a long line of Kaiju hunters, so he is probably the best at dealing with mid-sized and small Kaijus. Suddenly, another energy shot flies towards the giant Kaiju, and then Mina tells Hoshina that she is done now. However, for Hoshina and others, the show is just starting because the thousands of tiny Kaijus inside the body of the main one have started to awaken now. Their massive army floods the streets, and Hoshina tells his underlings that they should quickly clean up the small fries and return to the base in time for breakfast. Izu and Aoi thinks it is easy for him to say, and this is the chance for their seniors to show them that stamina is as important as firepower in this line of work. While the seniors rush to action, the platoon commander comes up behind the two boys, telling them that they are free to retire now. They are not going to give up, but all the new recruits are tired, and Four Eyes can see that on her screen. However, Hoshina believes that only those who can endure this situation and press forward will reach the next level. Most people who join the defense force retire as their combat power reaches 20 to 30%, but those who can cross that barrier reach the captain rank. Hoshina knows that Kiko has already crossed that barrier, and according to him, the next to do that will be Ikai, who has been neutralizing Kaijus without anyone's help. However, Ikai is really exhausted now, but despite that, he rushes to the main combat area along with Furu, who is jealous of his progress. On the way, they notice a guy wearing the coat of the cleaning company looking at the Kaiju corpses. Furu tells him to get out of the area since it is dangerous, but the man keeps rambling about how the reproductive organs he put in the Kaijus have been destroyed. He says that maybe someone in the defense force knows all about Kaiju, and then turns around to ask the two boys if they know anything, while his face starts to morph spontaneously, unable to see that clearly. Furu tells him to get out of the danger zone instantly because the cleanup crew are needed later. The man just gets up and stares at him with his dead fish-like eyes before pointing towards him. Ikai notices something coming, so he warns Furu in time, just as the Kaiju man shoots something at him from his finger. Thanks to Ikai's warning, Furu manages to avoid a direct hit to his heart, but he is still in too much pain and losing blood rapidly from the wound. Ikai goes to calm him down and asks him to use his suit to stop the bleeding. They look at the mysterious man in front of them, who bubbles up and turns into the mushroom Kaiju. Ikai is shocked and remarks that he is the same one from the exam who defeated Kiko. The mushroom Kaiju says that he will take them along as live samples to research, and Ikai tries contacting his platoon leader for backup. However, his communication device has stopped working because of a barrier erected by the Kaiju. He explains that he has figured out how humans communicate, and he came up with this technique to hide his presence from them. He shoots Ikai, who tries dodging his attack, but the bullets are too fast, and he gets hit in his abdomen and his thigh. However, the mushroom Kaiju is disappointed that his shots are not hitting. Earlier, when Ikai and Kafka were talking to Kiko in the cafe, she warned them about the mushroom Kaiju. She told them that it may seem that he is attacking out of nowhere, but he pumps his body mass through his finger, and if they watch closely, they can avoid his attack. That is exactly what Ikai is doing, and he dodges a bullet from the Kaiju before firing back. The Kaiju blocks it using his arm, and the bullet starts freezing the area around it. Ikai tells Furu to run to others and call for backup, and he asks why he should be the one to run away. The very next moment, Ikai tackles him and saves him from a bullet aimed at his chest, which only grazes his arm. Furu screams in pain, and then Ikai tells him to get going. He has no excuse to not obey his command now, and runs away, leaving Ikai alone to face the Kaiju. Ikai is terrified because even Kiko could not deal with the mushroom kaiju. He knows that he has no chance, but he remembers how Kafka risked his life to save him, and that is exactly the kind of defense force officer he wants to become. He charges at the kaiju while shooting it, but the kaiju quickly dodges his bullets and keeps shooting back at him. On the other hand, as Furu runs away, he stumbles and then starts cursing himself. Hoshina had told everyone that everyone hits a wall when they reach 20 to 30% potential, and only some people can scale that wall. Furu has been stuck at 20% for some weeks now, but Ikai surpassed him like it was nothing, and that frustrates him to no end. Meanwhile, the kaiju dodges all of Ikai's bullets and appears right in front of him. He remarks that Ikai knows some things about him, so he decides to show him something new. He sprouts arms from behind his back, and then readies all his fingers to shoot him. At that very moment, Furu comes out of nowhere and carries Ikai to safety. Ikai asks him why he is here, and as Furu bleeds, he recalls the day he was saved by Hina. He thinks that nothing has changed ever since then, and he is still a weakling who has to be saved by others. Furu claims that he will no longer be the one who needs to be saved, and the kaiju finally understands their plan. He tells the boys that their plan to escape and call help would have failed, because nothing can leave his domain without his permission. Furu sees a silver lining in that statement, and tells Ikai that they have no choice but to fight now. He gets up, and tells Ikai that they should take down the mushroom bastard together. However, he knows that he is not in good shape, so he volunteers to back up Ikai, and create an opening for him to take an effective shot. Ikai agrees and starts running towards the kaiju, while Furu fires at it to distract him. The kaiju dodges the bullet, but it turns out to be a special electric round that electrocutes the kaiju's arm even from a distance and dulls his motion. Mushroom kaiju decides to deal with him first, but this time Furu is also aware of his attack pattern and dodges his bullet. The kaiju is confused now, but then Furu hits his leg with the electric round, creating a chance for Ikai, who unleashes his maximum combat potential. He shoots the mushroom kaiju till his gun runs out of ammo, and the fragments of the kaiju splatter everywhere. However, when the dust settles, he is shocked to see that he didn't even hit the mushroom kaiju, who used the dead Kaijus behind him as a meat shield. He appears from inside the kaiju with all his fingers loaded to finish Ikai with the next attack. The kaiju's bullets hit Ikai point blank, and he begins losing consciousness. Meanwhile, Hoshina is overseeing other cadets when he receives a message that they have lost contact with Ikai and Furu. Kafka also hears this, and he notices some moment in the bodies of Kaijus nearby before the panic can even fully set in. Just then, Kiko comes running there, and tells him that she can sense that it is the same kaiju she faced in the exam. Now, Kafka is worried about his friends. On the other hand, Ikai falls to the ground after being shot, and feels as if his entire body is on fire. He still tries to stop the bleeding and get up to fight, but the mushroom kaiju decides to end his life quickly. Furu shoots him with his electric bullets again, but the kaiju easily deflects them this time. He shoots the gun out of Furu's hand and then knocks him off his feet before turning his attention to Ikai again. He approaches Ikai and starts shooting him with weak bullets to stop him from moving. With tears in his eyes, Furu keeps straining to reach Ikai's gun that is just in front of him to save his friend from being toyed with. He cries at his weakness and reaches the gun after a moment, determined to not let Ikai die here. He takes aim and shoots the kaiju, but to his horror, the gun is damaged. The kaiju tells him that he has made the first target immobile, so he doesn't need to let him live now. He prepares a lethal round, and Furu gives up hope about doing anything. He drops the gun and begins praying to God or demon, whoever may listen to his prayers and save his friend. The kaiju loads a lethal bullet and is about to shoot Furu when suddenly Kafka appears behind him in his kaiju transformation and punches him with all his might. The mushroom kaiju is sent flying and his head is torn off from his body because of Kafka's punch. Meanwhile, Kafka apologizes to Ikai for being so late. Ikai, who is barely holding on to his consciousness, thinks that he is too weak because he could not stop Kafka from turning into a kaiju despite his efforts. Kafka lifts him up as the mushroom kaiju picks up his head and asks if he is the kaiju number 8 everyone is talking about. Kafka puts Ikai in a safe corner and tells him that it will take a little longer to get away from here. He asks Ikai to calm down and close his wounds one by one using the suit, and then laughs, saying that he doesn't deserve to lecture him when he can't even do that. With that, Kafka walks towards the mushroom bastard, who asks him why is he obstructing his mission when he is a kaiju too. He remarks that Kafka is stronger than expected, so he must obtain his dead body to research it. He shoots Kafka and manages to penetrate his tough kaiju skin with a bullet. However, the mushroom kaiju realizes that killing him won't be so easy, so he sprouts hundreds of arms from his back, all ready to fire at him. Well, now Kafka is mad to learn that the mushroom was shooting his friends with this attack all this time. When the mushroom bastard shoots him, Kafka just unleashes his energy and roars loudly, neutralizing all his bullets in the air. Everyone is shocked to see this, and then Kafka quickly approaches Mushroom Kaiju and hits him with a terrifying flurry of punches. The Mushroom Kaiju takes some damage, so he uses the wall of corpses to buy time and heal himself. Kafka easily tears through that wall, and the kaiju uses all means possible to avoid taking a direct hit from him, because he knows that it may kill him. Kafka keeps pushing him back and shreds his defensive arms with his punches. The kaiju realizes that this is something he cannot handle and plans to retreat, but Kafka gives him no chance and hits him with a strong punch. He discovers his core with that too, and modifies his body to use his most destructive attack. With his ultimate punch, Kafka sends the Mushroom Kaiju crashing through half the city, and destroys his body enough to expose his core. The Mushroom Kaiju is lying helpless on the floor, and Kafka arrives there to finish him off. Just then, the Defense Force troops surround him and report his presence to everyone, and now he is nervous. On the other hand, Kiko is struggling to shoot down a kaiju, but her gun doesn't give her enough power. So she grabs a signpost from the road and splits the kaiju into two with one strike from it. With that, she wonders how far Kafka has gone. Earlier, when they learnt about Ikai and Furu being in trouble, Kafka decided to save them. He told Kiko that if they are with another kaiju, he can sense it, and then suddenly transformed. He told Kiko to take care of things while he is away. Hoshina is spurred into action with that, and he decides to dispatch a team to deal with him right away. Back at Kafka's location, he is nervous upon being surrounded by fellow Defense Force members, but because of his lack of concentration, the Mushroom Kaiju got enough time to recover. He jumps away from Kafka, saying that he understands how his powers work now and promises to kill him the next time. Kafka wants to attack him, but the mushroom bastard attacks the two Defense Force members to use them as decoys. Kafka rushes to save them and takes the hits himself. Mushroom Kaiju is surprised that he behaves like a human despite being a kaiju, and then disintegrates, telling Kafka that they will meet again. Kafka also realizes that he must escape now, so he hits the ground to create a dust cloud and leaps high into the sky using that chance. He regrets letting the Mushroom Kaiju go, but at least Ikai and Furu are being treated now. He reaches a dark street to recover, but Hoshina finds him there. As Kafka turns around to see the vice captain, he realizes that he is screwed now. Hoshina alerts everyone about Kaiju number 8's location, and then says that he will pay for messing with his men. Kiko and Ikai also hear this, and Ikai tries telling Hoshina that he is making a mistake, but he can't speak. Meanwhile, Hoshina walks towards Kafka, and then suddenly reaches him with super fast speed. He slashes Kafka with his special sword, and he barely dodges his attack. Kafka keeps running away from the vice captain's onslaught, recalling how he claimed that he was the best at hunting smaller Kaijus. As Hoshina approaches him with the desire to exterminate him, Kafka realizes that surviving him is not going to be easy. Hoshina begins unleashing the power of his suit and seeks approval from the support staff to remove the limiters on his strength. With the approval granted, he unleashes 92% of his combat potential and takes his stance, declaring that he will neutralize Kaiju number 8 now. Kafka takes up a boxing stance while sweating nervously, because he does not want to use his fists against Hoshina or he will get pulverized. However, he has no time to worry about anyone else, because before he can even notice it, Hoshina has delivered a deep cut to his chest and then jumped above. Kafka finally realizes that if he holds back here, he will not survive the fight. Hoshina attacks him again, and this time, Kafka easily dodges him. Hoshina simply lunges towards him with great speed and keeps on slashing away at Kafka, who can only barely dodge and block his attacks. Hoshina's attacks are too fast for him, and he takes some damage as he realizes that he cannot match the vice captain in terms of pure speed. Hoshina keeps pushing him back with his relentless assault. Kafka tries to run away by running on walls, but Hoshina follows him without any trouble, and then deals a very powerful slash. That attack tears off his arm and a great chunk of his chest, exposing his core. Kafka quickly regenerates the body parts he has just lost, but that makes him realize that regenerating consumes a lot of stamina. He starts running away because if he takes a few more strikes like the one before, he will be out of gas. Hoshina chases after him and keeps swinging his blade at him, and Kafka just blocks them with his fists. That surprises Hoshina because he is not holding back his strength, but the kaiju number 8 can match him pretty well. He believes that his fortitude level must be above 8, which makes him a walking natural disaster. However, despite that, Hoshina has been getting an odd feeling about their fight. He doesn't care much about that and puts some distance between himself and the target. He takes a unique stance, holding his blades at his sides and vibrating them so fast that they run orange as their temperature rises. Then suddenly, he sends 2 flying slashes towards Kafka, who barely dodges them and even loses a leg in the process. The flying slashes were just a decoy, and Hoshina has reached up to him to deliver a fatal blow. He swings at Kafka's core with all his might, but he was prepared for that. He has formed a small jaw in his chest that bites Hoshina's blade and keeps him stuck. Kafka has still taken some damage, but thankfully, he prevented things from getting any worse. He decides to counterattack now and concentrates his energy in his fist. Hoshina realizes that he is screwed, but Kafka only hits the handle of his dagger, forcing it out of his hands. However, as he looks ahead, he finds that the kaiju number 8 is gone. He facepalms, realizing that he let it go after acting so cool and cocky earlier. He reports his failure to the captain and others, who have already finished cleaning up the smaller Kaijus on their side. As Kiko hears this news, she recalls how Kafka or the kaiju number 8 saved her that day. She wonders if it is alright for her to believe in him, when suddenly, Kafka appears in front of her. She forgets her doubts and worries on seeing him, and Kafka apologizes for making her worry about him. Kiko acts like a classic tsundere and says she wasn't worried. Kafka then starts walking ahead, saying that Ikai and Furu were seriously injured, so he must go and check on them. Kiko stops him by pulling his mask strap and asks what can he even do by going to them, and assures him that they will be fine because the defense force has started to use kaiju regeneration technology to treat its officers. She then lectures him about being more careful, because Hoshina is sharp, and he might find a clue that leads to him. Meanwhile, Hoshina is meditating on his loss, while everyone around him cleans up the kaiju corpses. Mina comes there and remarks that it is really rare to see him down like this, and even takes a picture to embarrass him later. She then asks him if kaiju number 8 was strong, and he replies that it was likely a great kaiju with a fortitude above 8. Mina is shocked to hear that, but Hoshina says that fortunately, there have been no casualties because of kaiju number 8. It doesn't seem the type to attack people without reason. That reminds Hoshina about the strange feeling he had and how the kaiju attacked only his weapon and not him. He also thinks that everything about the fight seemed more like fighting a human and not a kaiju. Mina tells him that things like these don't matter, and she will deal with any kaiju that comes in her way. Suddenly, they receive a report from one of their teammates, who tells them that the humanoid kaiju that attacked Ikai and Furu was the same one from the exam site. He adds that when they saw the kaiju for the first time, it was in the form of a human. That news is the biggest shock for both the captain and the vice captain. Right now, the mushroom head kaiju is limping on a highway in his human form. A car comes from behind, and when he doesn't get aside after the constant honking, the car owner comes out to confront him. The mushroom bastard ponders blowing his brains out with his finger game, but then simply walks to him and begins transforming into a kaiju. His head enlarges and he opens his jaw wide, eating the poor man and taking his form. He steals the car and keeps driving ahead, still struggling to maintain its new form. The car radio reports that the mushroom head kaiju has been deemed kaiju number 9 and marked as a priority neutralization target. However, he doesn't care about that, because all he can think about is ways to defeat kaiju number 8. On the other hand, Ikai opens his eyes in a hospital room with Kafka and Kiko by his side. He looks a bit disappointed in himself and tells Kafka that he is glad to see him fine. Kafka hits him with a karate chop and says that he should be the one to say that. Ikai then thanks Kafka for saving him and Furu, and they are shocked to hear that. The reason for that is Furu, who is in the same room, and he asks Ikai why is he thanking Kafka for saving them because it was kaiju number 8 that saved them. Everyone freaks out, but Kiko quickly says that Kafka helped everyone by figuring out that the Kaijus had reproductive organs. Thankfully, Furu is simple-minded enough to believe it. He then begins talking about how strong kaiju number 8 was, and how he just blew away the mushroom-headed bastard. Kafka is pleased by this praise, but Furu spots that, and Kiko once again has to cover up for him. Soon, Furu and Ikai are discharged from the hospital, and their friends throw a party to welcome them. It is actually the party to celebrate their first successful mission, but they had to wait till the 2 injured people came out of the hospital. The party starts, and a whole squad of servants led by a veteran chef arrives there to tell them about the premium quality beef they are going to have today. Kafka and others are shocked to hear this, and the chef says that they cannot treat guests of Izu with anything less than this. Kafka is shocked and wonders if Izu is really so rich, and Kiko asks him if he doesn't already know that Izu is the heir to Izumo Technologies, the largest anti-kaiju weapon manufacturer in the country. Kafka freaks out on hearing that, because Izumo Technologies creates the suits they wear too, and Kiko adds that Izu is ever richer than her family. Soon, Hoshina comes there and makes a toast, and then the party starts. Everyone gets busy drinking and eating, and Ikai thanks Hoshina for helping make this wonderful party possible. However, he spoke too soon. Furu and Kiko start quarreling about the other being too selfish to work in a team, and then Aoi and Izu also start accusing each other of neglecting the basics. Kafka is already drunk, and he clings to Izu, asking if his company gave him a defective suit because he couldn't even kill a single kaiju. Soon, other people also start fighting among themselves. Ikai thinks this is bad, but then he notices that everyone is talking about the last mission and the mistakes they made. He realizes that this tension and conflict is a good thing because it can help them grow stronger and get over their weaknesses. Well, it would be good if they were only talking about the mission, but things soon start getting personal. Aoi refuses to respect Kafka, even though he is older than him because he is not strong enough, so Kafka challenges him to an arm wrestling match. Everyone else also starts getting physical, and Ikai can only watch it all dumbfounded. Hoshina laughs on seeing this, and Four Eyes says that this is the yearly tradition here. Later, Izu goes to talk to the chef in private, who is glad that he called him to serve them here. He is an old family employee who knows about the internal conflicts of the family. He asks Izu if he has been in contact with his father recently, and he replies that he has not talked with him ever since he left home. Suddenly, Aoi comes there, and Izu wonders if he heard their private conversation. Aoi just says that he was looking for the washroom and goes his way, and Izu decides to give him a pass because he doesn't seem too nosy. Back at the party, Hoshina has an announcement. He tells Kafka that because of his discovery in the battlefield the other day, he saved many lives. His accomplishment was noted by the higher-ups, so he has been promoted to an officer, and he is no longer a trainee. Kafka takes some time to process it, but as he understands what the vice captain just said, he lights up with joy. He turns to Ikai and then begins shouting to celebrate his success, with everyone else cheering on for him. Everyone rushes to give him the victory toss, while Aoi and Izu watch from a distance. Aoi suddenly says that he wants to stop the team from losing even a single person if he can, and Izu agrees. The next day, Mina gives Kafka the badge of an officer and congratulates him on his promotion. He swears to give it his all to fighting Kaijus, and then gets nervous as he takes his leave. Mina warns him not to get carried away, because he is still a long way from standing next to her. Kafka is glad that she remembers their promise, and tells Mina to just wait for him. She smiles at that, and then asks him to do 50 push-ups right away for addressing a superior officer by name. Mina suddenly starts talking about Kaiju number 8, freaking him out even more, but then reveals that she must attend a meeting about them at the headquarters. She asks Kafka to ask Hoshina about the paperwork and other formalities, and informs him that it was Hoshina who recommended him for promotion. At night, Kafka is busy studying by himself. He decides to call it a day and heads back to his dorm, when he notices the light in the training room is still on. Kafka thinks some idiot forgot to turn the lights off, but when he goes to the room, he sees Hoshina training his killer move. He is surrounded by an intense aura that gives Kafka the chills, and then he finds out that Hoshina is doing image training and fighting an imaginary kaiju. It doesn't take Kafka long to notice that Hoshina is recreating their earlier battle in the image training, and that terrifies him. He falls down and Hoshina notices him. Kafka nervously asks him what is he doing here, and he replies that he is working on a strategy to take down Kaiju number 8 with a single strike the next time they meet. He says that this time, he messed up and didn't go all out in the start, otherwise he would have won. Kafka is truly terrified now, and Hoshina tells him to stop overreacting. He says that no normal officer can face Kaiju number 8, and number 9 must be as strong, so he is going to handle both of them himself. Hoshina starts returning to training with that, and Kafka thinks that he is really amazing, because he wants to keep both the civilians and the officers safe. Kafka salutes him, and promises to do his best to assist him, and Hoshino just smiles before placing him in a chokehold and telling him not to get too cocky when he is still at 1%. While they are just bantering below, high above the clouds, a bunch of giant flying Kaijus is circling the city, and on top of them is a red humanoid kaiju, who gives them the order to descend to the city and destroy it. Meanwhile, Hoshina is in his office looking at the reports about Kaiju number 8. He recalls that during their encounter, Kaiju number 8 felt too human. He also thinks about Kaiju number 9, which could disguise itself as a human and talk like one too. All this makes him wonder what is happening with Kaijus. Kafka is enjoying some fresh air outside, thinking about how Hoshina has some expectations of him, and he can't betray them. He heads to rest for the night when he suddenly sees something approaching the ground rapidly. He can only keep staring as numerous meteors fall down on the city and create huge explosions and destructions everywhere they hit. The sound of the explosions wakes up everyone, and Hoshina immediately contacts the control center to update him on the situation. Four Eyes tells him that it seems Kaijus attacked their base from the air and they have surrounded it. The number of Kaijus their system reads keeps on increasing, and every single one of them has a fortitude rating of over 6, which makes them really powerful and dangerous. Hoshina immediately puts on his suit and commands all the Defense Force officers to get ready to battle. He tells them that since Captain Mina is away, he will be taking the command. He tells the control center to lure as many Kaijus as they can to their training facility so that the officers can defeat them without worrying about damage. However, since he doesn't receive any reports about the damage caused by the Kaijus in the city, he begins wondering if they are targeting the Defense Force base on purpose. Kafka is still outside, and he is terrified as he sees their base destroyed and covered in fire. He sees the wyvern-type Kaijus flying above them, and panics because they are really strong and troublesome to deal with. He begins running away, but then suddenly, he remembers something. He thinks that if wyvern Kaijus are here, there is something very wrong. He immediately puts on his communication device and contacts Hoshina. Kafka tells him that they see only about a dozen wyvern-type Kaijus each year, but they are always alone. He believes that since all these wyvern-type Kaijus have attacked them at once, it means that something is strange. Hoshina realizes exactly what he is trying to say, and he looks ahead to see a human-sized kaiju leading the wyverns. He realizes that the human-sized kaiju is the leader of the wyverns, and he is strong enough to unite them, and smart enough to form a plan to attack their base. The red kaiju emerges from the smoke and approaches Hoshina, asking if he is the strongest human in this base. Hoshina is shocked to hear the kaiju speak, but he still tells him that he is the strongest one here in absence of the captain. The red kaiju declares that he is his prey, and just then, Four Eyes reports that the fortitude rating of the red kaiju is 8-3. That means it is a natural disaster level kaiju, and Hoshina immediately gives the command of the operation to another officer so that he can focus on the red kaiju. Seeing him distracted, the red kaiju simply flicks his finger towards him, and Hoshina barely dodges whatever he just shot at him. The shot destroys the wall behind him, and then suddenly, the red kaiju arrives there. He hits Hoshina with a hit whose shockwave is powerful enough to shatter windows, but Hoshina manages to dodge it and saves another officer on the way. The red kaiju is impressed with him, and decides to go all out to annihilate the humans in this base. He opens his eye and then roars loudly, relaying his message to the wyvern-type Kaijus, who also begin to roar in response. Hoshina becomes sure that the Kaijus are targeting their base now, but as he is distracted, the red kaiju rushes in to attack him. He dodges his attack at the last minute and avoids getting crushed to death. He draws his daggers and begins his counterattack while dodging the swift and powerful blows of the kaiju. However, the armor of the red kaiju is harder than even kaiju number 8, and Hoshina can't even dent it. On the other hand, the officers open fire at the wyvern Kaijus, but their attacks have no effect at all. It just enrages the kaiju that unleashes a powerful blast breath at them. The commanding officer orders everyone to try different type of ammo, but then Kafka contacts him to tell him that attacking the wyverns from the front is useless. He is still getting ready, but he can tell that the weakness of the wyvern Kaijus is their back because he has cleaned them before. He reveals that the core of the wyvern Kaijus is near their back, where the skin is also quite thin to reduce their weight. The commanding officer tells Kafka that he did well, and immediately orders everyone to act in teams, with one person distracting the kaiju from front while the other sneaks behind to attack. Izu and Aoi form a team. Aoi takes the duty of dealing damage, and Izu becomes the decoy. He opens fire on the kaiju from front, while Aoi reaches behind the kaiju and takes aim to hit him. But just then, the wall next to him breaks and another kaiju emerges from it. It shoots its blast breath towards Aoi, who barely dodges it. He gets back and realizes that the Kaijus are working in teams. Other officers also report the same thing, and Kafka receives all this news as he is running to the site. No one has any idea what to do now, but then Kiko says that she knows another way to defeat the Kaijus. She runs towards a kaiju at a speed faster than an F1 car, wielding a huge battle axe. Furu can only watch as she passes him by, jumps up and strikes the kaiju with a powerful blow that shatters through his thick front armor. The kaiju falls to the ground, and Kiko just flaunts her overwhelming power. Earlier, Mina and Hoshina had taken her to the underground weapon storage room to give her a special weapon just for her. Kiko was shocked on hearing this because one has to be a captain to have a special personalized weapon, but Hoshina told her that they are making an exception for her. Mina said that since the number and power of Kaijus is growing this year, they need more powerful fighters. Since Kiko was already the third strongest officer on the base, she was being considered as a part of the main force. That is how she got the giant battle axe, which is still a prototype. Kiko faces the second kaiju in front of her that shoots its blast breath at her. She jumps high in the air to dodge it, and then uses the special feature of the axe that releases a shockwave when a trigger is pressed. She uses the shockwave to increase the speed of the axe and hits the kaiju's neck, efficiently cutting it off with her first technique she has named Falling Thunder. Just then, another kaiju comes to tackle her. Kiko moves back and then unleashes her second special move, in which she unleashes the shockwave as she swings her axe forward and deals a powerful blow that destroys the kaiju from inside. She names this move the Water Skimmer. Furu and Ikai can only watch her in awe and say that this weapon is perfectly suited for her extravagant and aggressive fighting style. She is pleased with that too, but then suddenly, a kaiju comes flying towards her from the sky. Kiko is nervous because she doesn't have a special move prepared for that. But then Ikai shoots the kaiju with his freezing rounds and causes it to freeze and crash to the ground. He warns Kiko to not be careless when fighting flying enemies. The kaiju stands up again, and Ikai riddles it with his freezing rounds, keeping it in place for Kiko to use her third special move, Half Moon, that is a direct slash powerful enough to behead the kaiju. The kaiju falls to the ground, and Kiko tells Ikai over the communication device that if he can keep up with her, he can support her. Ikai takes up the offer, and everyone else also hears about it. Meanwhile, Izu and Aoi have defeated their target kaijus too, and they decide to not lose to anyone. That is why they plan to fight as a team and steal Kiko's kill as she distracts the kaijus. In the meantime, Hoshina has led the red kaiju far away from everyone else. He is constantly dodging and running away from the kaiju's heavy blows. The red kaiju keeps attacking him, and as Hoshina dodges his attacks, the kaiju sends a truck flying with just a few punches. Not only is it very strong, but it also seems to be enjoying the fight. Hoshina tells Four Eyes to open the gate to the training facility, and she does so. However, the red kaiju tears up the doors as he follows him and then throws some steel beams at him. The dust makes Hoshina cough, and the red kaiju gets away from his vision. He tries looking around, but then finds the kaiju's voice coming from his blind spot. The red kaiju tells Hoshina that even other kaijus can't fight him like this, so he is getting excited to eat him and grow even stronger. He darts towards Hoshina, who somehow blocks his punch at the last moment, but still gets sent flying at a tremendous speed and crashes into the building behind him. But even then, he managed to slice off the red kaiju's arm cleanly. Hoshina is not harmed at all from the previous damage, and he skips protocol and activates the full power of his suit to face his enemy. With 92% of the suit's combat potential being utilized, Hoshina is ready to fight seriously. On the other hand, an officer is about to be roasted by a kaiju's blast breath, and Kafka is running towards her to rescue her. He realizes that he won't make it in time, so he transforms his legs into kaiju mode and greatly increases his speed, saving the girl from the attack. Ikai also arrives there and asks Kafka if he is fine. Kiko tells him that she and Ikai will keep the kaijus distracted, so the injured should leave the battlefield. Kafka and the girl are glad to hear that, but before they can go, Ikai tells him to not take any risks because he is a full officer now. With that, he rushes ahead and begins shooting the kaiju in front of them. More officers arrive to distract the kaiju, while Kiko takes care of the second kaiju that was coming to rescue its comrade. Kafka is stunned to see their efficient teamwork, when suddenly, his communication device rings loudly because backup is here. The off-duty senior officers have returned to fight the Kaijus. Kafka is amazed as he sees the number of Kaijus on the map disappear, and he tells the girl with him that they should focus on rescuing the injured. They run to find injured people, and Kafka can only think how proud he is of his division. On the other hand, Hoshina faces the red kaiju. They rush at each other and Hoshina uses a flying slash to deal the kaiju some damage. Hoshina keeps dodging his rampage and dealing some precise cuts in the gaps between his exoskeleton. The red kaiju is not impressed by this boring tactic, and he just shuts up the gaps by puffing up his scales. Just then, Hoshina uses his true power and delivers a deep cut to his chest. The kaiju turns to attack him, but he easily chops off his second arm too. He uses some more fancy moves, cutting down whatever is left of the kaiju's both arms. The entire control room rejoices on this victory, but Hoshina tells them that it is too early. Suddenly, Kafka feels weird as his kaiju detection ability is kicking his brain, warning him about a strong foe nearby. In front of Hoshina, the injured red kaiju starts growing as a mass of tissues, and soon becomes taller than the buildings nearby. Using its multiple mouths, it spews out ultra-high temperature steam, covering the entire area and forcing Hoshina to back up. Four Eyes takes another reading of the kaiju's fortitude and finds that it is constantly increasing. The mass of tissues starts changing its shape, and it soon becomes a gigantic version of the red kaiju, whose fortitude reading comes out to be 9. The control room is in a panic over the situation, and they believe that Vice Captain Hoshina can't deal with a kaiju of that size on his own. On the other hand, Kafka is also getting severe migraines, and he knows that Hoshina is in danger, so he decides to rush to his side to help him. Meanwhile, the giant red kaiju attacks Hoshina, shattering the ground below with its fists. Hoshina dodges its punch and then climbs on its arm. He uses a powerful attack on the kaiju's neck, leading a stream of blood to flow out violently. Hoshina keeps at it, jumping using the buildings as a support and slashing the red kaiju all over the place. The red kaiju only screams in pain before telling Hoshina that his speed won't save him. He throws another punch at him, and Hoshina dodges it as he jumps towards the kaiju's head, aiming for its eye. The kaiju protects its eye, so the vice captain has no choice but to keep at his initial strategy of dealing small wounds all over its body. However, his blades can't cut deep through the giant kaiju, and he is clearly at a disadvantage. As he is thinking about his next move, he suddenly feels a stroke of pain and backs into a corner, where he vomits blood. The suit interface tells him that he is exceeding the operational limits of the suit, as he has been at maximum power for 10 minutes already. Even Four Eyes tells him to shut his maximum power immediately or it will be fatal for him, and Hoshina realizes that 1 minute is the longest he can sustain this power for. Just then, the wyvern kaijus begin attacking him. As Hoshina tries dodging them, the kaijus begin self-destructing one by one, and he takes some damage from their suicidal attacks. Hoshina quickly gets up and uses the smoke from the explosions as his cover. As he heads towards the red kaiju again, he climbs up a building and leaps at the red kaiju with his finishing move, but then the monster sprouts eyes all over its back. Hoshina is creeped out for a moment, and that is enough for the red kaiju to hit him through the buildings. He is severely injured now, and the safety protocols of the suit also activate, forcibly canceling the maximum release mode. As he is lying unconscious, Hoshina sees a scene from his past, where his father or teacher was telling him to give up on joining the defense force, because despite being a genius, he cannot reach his full potential in this age, where swords are a weapon of the past. The worried Four Eyes screams Hoshina's name till he regains his senses, and he gives her his usual smile while saying that he is alright. He strains as he gets back on his feet, and wonders what can he do now without his maximum release. He begins walking towards the red kaiju who is wreaking havoc on the abandoned buildings. Hoshina says that he will fight till the end, and the red kaiju notices him just then. He tries punching him again, but Hoshina jumps high in the sky and attacks its face. The red kaiju instantly heals from that damage, and Hoshina is forced to run. The kaiju says that he has figured out that Hoshina can't defeat him with the tiny weapons, and sends a wyvern towards him. The wyvern explodes right behind the vice captain, and in that moment, he once again recalls his past. where his father figure told him to give up on joining the defense force because swords were no longer useful in this era. His superiors at the defense force also told him the same thing. Hoshina scoffs at them as he picks himself up and runs away, thinking about how Hina was the first one to tell him that she needed his power as a blade specialist. She told him that his ability would be greatly helpful when they deal with small but powerful Kaijus, and asked him to join her squad. Thinking about her words, Hoshina rushes at the kaiju, swearing to take it down no matter what it takes. He deals a deep wound to its chest, and then attacks its neck, letting its blood rain everywhere. He keeps attacking the red kaiju with his combo attacks, but then the kaiju suddenly grabs him. Hoshina screams in pain, and Kafka reaches the scene just in time to witness this. He can't see the vice captain suffering, so he decides to transform into a kaiju to save him, even as Ikai tells him that it is dangerous. However, as he is just starting to transform, he hears Mina's voice over the communication device, telling everyone that they did good. Hoshina smiles, telling the kaiju that he won this round, just as a powerful cannon shot hits the kaiju's arm and blows it away. The kaiju screams in pain and lets Hoshina down. In the distance, Mina is ready with her cannon aimed at the kaiju, with her white tiger acting as her backup. She fires at the kaiju, but barely misses its arm. In response, the red kaiju sends the suicide bombing wyverns towards her, and Mina dodges them with her white tiger covering her back. The red kaiju regenerates from the damage almost instantly, and Hoshina realizes that dealing with it won't be easy after all, so he decides to help the captain by slashing the kaiju's feet to limit its movement. However, he is unable to maintain his balance now because his suit is not in peak condition. Also, the wounds he delivers to the kaiju heal in an instant, and Hoshina wonders what can he do now. Just at that moment, Kiko rushes to the battlefield and tries attacking the kaiju with her battle axe. However, she can't even scratch it, but Hoshina has just got an idea. He rushes ahead and tells Kiko that he will cut open the scales of the kaiju, and she should attack its soft flesh after that. He deals some quick slashes to the kaiju's leg, and then Kiko hits it with her axe, causing a lot of damage that makes the kaiju scream in pain. She loses balance after that, and Ikai quickly comes to support her. Her suit has also started to overheat, but Hoshina thinks that she did enough, because the last attack brought the red kaiju to its knees. Using this chance, Mina attacks its back with her cannon, exposing its core. However, she has only one bullet left now, and a wyvern kaiju shows up next to her. Luckily, other members of the squad are there to cover for her, and they shoot down the wyvern for her. The wyverns begin their suicide bombing attack, while the rest of the squad members constantly fire at the red kaiju. Hoshina rushes towards it, avoiding its punch and running on its arm to reach closer to it. He deals some damage to the kaiju's leg, forcing himself to go past his limits as he keeps on slashing the kaiju. He is practically forcing his body to move now, trying to buy as much time he can for his captain. Then suddenly, he finds himself right in front of the red kaiju's mouth, who quickly moves to swallow him whole. However, that was enough time for Mina to charge her cannon. She shoots the kaiju's exposed core with it, and sends its torso and arms flying as its blood splatters everywhere. A massive smoke cloud covers the region, but Four Eyes declares that the red kaiju has been neutralized. Everyone rejoices and congratulates each other for this victory, and then the injured soldiers are taken to safety. Kiko is sitting depressed, and Hoshina comes to lift her up, followed by Mina. Kafka can only watch them from a distance, bawling his eyes out because his Defense Force squad is as cool as he had always imagined it to be. Ikai taunts him, saying that his face is a mess, and Kafka tells him to stop ruining his moment. Ikai replies that they are just starting, and they should keep doing their best from now on. Meanwhile, the squad seniors tell Mina and Hoshina to leave the rest to them, because their suits are already at their limits. However, the problem is not yet over, and the white tiger is the first one to sense it. Everyone's attention turns to the sky, where a giant mass that looks like it will explode at any moment is pulsating over the base. The wyverns fly into it, and another exploding blob is added to the mass. Everyone is terrified as they realize that the red kaiju pulled a fast one on them even after its death. Four Eyes reports that the power of this kaiju bomb is equal to a nuclear bomb, and it will evaporate the entire city. Some enthusiastic officers begin shooting the bomb, but that only explodes a few blobs and creates a strong gust. Mina orders everyone to evacuate, but Hoshina knows there is no time. Just then, they hear the voice of the red kaiju, who declares that this round is a draw. Everyone is clueless now, but then suddenly, Kafka starts running ahead. Ikai tries stopping him, and so does everyone else. Hoshina even tries to chase him down, but then he suddenly notices that Kafka was too fast just now, and that should not be possible with just 1% of his suit's power. Kafka keeps leaping over the rubble, and finally transforms into a kaiju as he jumps high in the sky. Everyone is left aghast and speechless by this, and they can only stare at Kafka, or the kaiju number 8 with their mouths wide open. Kafka realizes the outcome of what he has just done. He apologizes to his friends who trusted him despite knowing his terrible secret, but he is not going to stop now. He begins charging up his body, modifying it to release some jet thrusters behind his legs and arms. He thinks that everyone risked their lives in the fight just now, and he can't be the only one who thinks of his safety first. He launches the jet thrusters and leaps towards the kaiju bomb. He hits it with all his might, and his kaiju armor starts cracking in the process. Kafka's full power punch sends the kaiju bomb flying into the stratosphere, and he falls down to the ground unconscious. He hits the ground, and then Mina suddenly tells everyone to lay on the ground and put their shields on the max. The kaiju bomb explodes immediately after that, and its explosion radius is so big that it is visible from space. The shockwaves and pressure from the explosion starts demolishing the training area, but Kafka stands firm in his kaiju form, providing protection to 2 officers from the debris coming towards them. Soon, the explosion dies out, and the sky is cleared. Everyone begins getting up, and the 2 people Kafka just protected start crawling back in fear. He has also spent all his energy with that, and his armor starts crumbling away. Kafka realizes that he is done for now, and just then, Mina approaches him. She calls him the kaiju number 8, and points her gun at him, telling him that she is taking him into custody immediately. Kafka slowly turns towards her and finds other officers standing by Mina's side and aiming their guns at him. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe for part 11, and make sure to check out this brand new anime about the strongest hero who pretends to be normal to live a quiet life.